something that's in beta right now is there's a concept called geofencing. For those who don't know what that is, that's essentially drawing almost like a polygon or targeting a very specific area geographically. Yeah. And when someone goes in that area, or if they have gone in this geographic area, people do ads towards it. So like I've seen this from anywhere from like, say Dick's Sporting Goods. There's a fishing department. And they can actually track if someone has gone specifically in that fishing department, then they will send like actual ads catered to fishing.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining us for today's episode of Real Estate Disruptors. So we got Ty, Garrett, and Rami E with Dataflick, and they flew in from Knoxville, Tennessee to talk about how to use AI to find your next motivated seller. I am on a mission to create 100 millionaires, and the information on this podcast alone is enough for you to become a millionaire in the next 5 to 7 years. If you'll take consistent action, you will become one. And we talk about becoming a millionaire on the show many, many times. I want to show you guys how to do it. Go to wealthevaluation.com. We actually have a 6-page worksheet to help you give a financial roadmap on becoming a millionaire. We also know that running a sales team is hard work, even thankless at times. You've got to hold your people accountable to numbers they know they need to hit. This might make you feel exasperated. If you feel like you're alone, you are not. Brandon and I are helping other business owners get through to their sales teams to yield record performances, even in this market. If you think this might help you, text leaders to 33777. And if you get value out of the show, please tag a friend below. Share this episode right now. That way we can all grow together. And this is a live show, so please ask your questions for Rami and Ty to answer. And I've been talking to them for even an hour before the show. They're a wealth of information. Make sure you guys ask your questions. All right? You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. So the first question is really, what was your life like right before real estate?
Gotcha. You can actually take the lead on this.
Sure. So it all started. We were working in a wholesale operation with Tiffany and Josh High over at Hills Homes, who now own Results Driven. So we were doing that, and we started back in 2019, just on the wholesaling side, right?
Yep.
And we were doing everything from like flips all the way to a lot of wholesale deals, building rental portfolios, all that good stuff. I was running dispositions for them and overseeing rehabs, project management, things like that. Rami was working on the acquisition side.
Yes. Follow-up quickly pushed into acquisitions. It was pretty abrupt, but it was solid. You learn a ton that way.
For sure.
But what attracted you guys to go work over there?
Definitely.
Yeah. So before we got started, this is back in like 2018. So I done a ton of like educational programs, courses, things like that. And I realized pretty fast that like I couldn't really do it alone. So I was posting a ton in like different masterminds that we were a part of, like courses, things like that, and just communities in general. And so I tried to launch marketing by myself and got a little bit of traction. Like I did bandit signs and things like that, and realized pretty fast that like I needed help. So I started posting in all these communities and things, to ask for that help. And Tiffany and Josh actually, just offered me a job, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to come up and move from Knoxville to Columbus to kind of like break this down and like learn more about it?" 3 months into doing that, that was when I called up Rami, and I was like, "Hey, you want to learn about real estate?"
Yeah. So for me, it was a very different story. Graduated with psychology from UT. Did landscaping for 6 months after that. So completely unrelated.
Landscaping as in like you were the one that was trimming, or you were working at a landscaping company?
Yeah, I was working for the landscaping company, but I was trimming the hedges, moving.
Gotcha.
Like I was the physical labor. Yeah, so I did that for 6 months, then was like, I have this degree. I should try to utilize this. Started looking at grad schools, things of that nature. A passing in the family actually happened, so that kind of stalled that. But from there, Ty called me and was like, "Hey, I know you're in limbo. This follow-up specialist role just opened up. Come on up, give it a try." So I did, and there we were.
So I obviously spend a lot of time talking about sales and teaching sales, and a giant part of sales is psychology. Do you find your degree in psychology to be helpful for you in any way?
So it's actually very interesting. I feel like the main thing that I took from that, from just psychology all in all, is empathy, not sympathy. Right? You never want to be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that happened," but or like, "I feel what you're saying," etc., because you're not going to be able to relate to that person that way because that's their unique experience.
It's inauthentic.
Exactly. So the main thing that I took from it was more of a, sounds like you went through a very hard time and almost being like an extra value add to them.
Right.
That's probably the biggest takeaway I got that I applied to sales.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you're doing follow-up,
Yes.
and then you got moved into acquisitions.
Yes. So
So
You
this
got,
is 20,
yeah, you got to break that down too.
so you're in 2019. Is it 2019?
Yeah, so we went to Columbus like right in the middle of 2019, a little bit earlier in the year.
So you guys are both from Knoxville.
Yes,
Correct.
And you guys both went to Columbus
correct.
correct.
to work
Like
in a sales office.
that we never met any of these people.
Okay.
I know
Cool.
it sounds crazy, but
But how was that experience? Because like a lot of people, actually one of the things that I've been pushing, I actually said this on a live yesterday, last couple of days, is like the best way to get started is actually work for somebody.
100%.
Because they say like, you watch the YouTube videos, like stuff we record right here, right? You watch the YouTube videos, you can buy the courses, this and that. You do everything yourself, but there's a lot of challenges, and like there are things that you have questions, and it's hard to get those answers.
100%.
So what was it like? Like how valuable was your experience working for someone that's in the business?
Very, very valuable. So one of the biggest things was right when we moved up, they had a very big team. It was about a month or two after being there. At this point, I don't have a lot of money. I'm living on Ty's floor with a mattress Tiffany actually let me borrow, right? And he's in a 600 square foot studio.
Yeah.
So-
So tight.
Very much just making it how we can. But they restructured their whole team.
Mhm.
So major layoffs, the remaining like 2 people on the sales and disposition are Ty and I. So that was a big just push into that
2
acquisition
people left in
role.
sales was
Well, so in the entire organization, we went from 15 to just us 2 overnight.
okay.
And then it was like I was heading all of the dispositions, all of our project management for like, essentially exiting, and he was doing the front end on like all the acquiring.
Yes.
Wow.
So it was absolute chaos and like tons and tons of hours like put in every week. But I think that was kind of like what expedited our learning curve, I would say.
Absolutely.
100%. And they were learning as well, right? It was felt just like a big community of all of us being like, okay, we're restructuring, start from the beginning. Let's figure it out. And I still remember the day. It was during our morning sales meeting, right? We're all just talking about how we can improve, etc. And we get a call in. Tiffany picks it up, being the follow up, and she's like, Rami, you're going to be acquisition starting today. I was like, what? She's like, yeah, I'm going to pass you to my acquisition manager. Give me a minute and give me the script. And that was the first just like thrown into the fire. But I think that's what really drove me to learn as much as I did.
Gotcha.
100%.
So how did you go from acquisition manager and disposition manager into Dataflick? Like that's
Not an easy jump. Yeah.
For sure. So we were working there for about a year, and the whole goal originally, I think, was just so we could go and like learn and kind of get our feet wet, because we had a lot of, well, at this time, you weren't even in the real estate space yet. It
Not
was
at
just me like investing in like all these educational programs and stuff. So as I'm going through this, I got a lot of like almost theory, and then we had a lot of like, experience almost at a startup, which was amazing. And now we're like, okay, we're ready to kind of do this ourselves. And a big part of this too, like we're super into like, friends, family, like they're a huge part of our lives. So we obviously are pretty homesick at this point too, because we just kind of up and left. And so this was actually, we seriously started considering it in November, December of 2019, just because that was the holidays were, kind of hitting pretty hard, I would say. And so, we put our notice and we're like, hey, let's go back to Knoxville, try and do this ourselves. And that was in January to February of 2020 when we came back.
I stayed for an extra month, kind of tried to help them get another hire to replace me. I didn't want to leave them hanging, right?
Yeah.
They taught me so much. Very thankful.
Sure. And we
but-
were helping build like a lot of the structure that they, implemented still today and things like that.
right.
Not to, like,
No,
touch off, yeah.
100%. So we came back, I believe February 1st of 2020 was
Okay.
like the first day back. And we heard this rumor of like, oh, COVID-19 is going around. And we're like, what are the odds that really affects us?
Yeah,
And lo and behold.
I remember we were like sitting in our apartment and we were talking about like, is like, could this be an issue? Like for us starting our business,
Yeah.
like in Knoxville and stuff. And we were like, it'll be fine. It won't be a big impact. Obviously, pretty wrong.
Slight difference.
Yep. So we get back, we start doing a lot of like different things just to like test and segment out like, hey, this is like working, this is not, like this is how we want to do it. And we were buying data because obviously you have to have all the data to actually launch the marketing. And we realized pretty quickly that it was super fragmented as an industry and it was insanely expensive.
Yeah.
So at first I was like, okay, like let's see if we can aggregate our own data, like build our own, systems around this. So I started learning like code by hand and realized pretty fast that it was going to be very inefficient for me to like do that, try and run marketing and try and like launch like a real estate company.
Mm-hmm.
So we made our first hire. We didn't know it was for Dataflick yet, but just like a hire to help us run the data side.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just like scraping public resources and like, going to the county, like getting PDFs, like data entering, like all of
So
that in.
it was at this time you weren't necessarily starting Dataflick. It was
Correct.
we're doing a wholesaling company in
Yep.
Knoxville, and while we're doing this, we need to get better data.
Exactly.
100%.
Okay.
And so now we like, build our own like little system and we're like, hey, this could be pretty good. And so when we're like doing this, we realize that we need money because there's so many like educational things that talk about like, oh, you can get into this with no money, but like they don't talk about marketing dollars and like all the other expenses that kind of add up really fast. So we were trying to find some funding to like get the real estate company started, but really it ended up turning into Dataflick.
Yeah, pretty fast. So the hire, his name's Gabe, still the best hire we've made to this day. Love the guy. But he was so good with compiling that data and even skip tracing on the back end, like really getting that to be a cohesive process. He did phenomenal on. But it was mainly all for that wholesaling company until we figured out, hey, we actually really have something on the data side that we can actually help other people out with and bring growth. I remember Ethan, so a good friend of ours, Ethan, he was one of the first ones that we like helped compile data for
Right.
and try to use it like that. And he started seeing success. And that was, I guess, the unofficial start of it all.
Right.
But yeah.
It was that proof of concept. It's kind of like doing your first wholesale deal.
Exactly.
What was it that you guys felt like you landed on that was different? Because you could buy data. I mean, at this time, right? PropStream was coming up, Batch, or they were doing really well.
Yep.
Batch was coming up. Like there's a lot of different data providers out there. Probably Radar's been around forever. What was it that you guys felt like you guys landed on that was different?
So I learned a technique of like data governance of just like tracking like how accurate things were and just different techniques with Gabe on implementing that. And we started buying some data from different providers and we realized pretty quickly that the quality was pretty low and very like outdated. So when I realized like, hey, we can just pull directly and kind of build our own systems, it's way better than like what we were able to buy at the time. And obviously things have changed a lot over the last like 3 years, but like at the time, like that was just the best we could do. And it was very, very affordable for us. So it just kind of like was a double-edged sword there. So we started doing, list stacking of every degree that you can probably think of and actually doing like, hey, this person transacted, let's remove them from the database and like doing a lot of like cleaning and stuff like that. And when we were talking to, Ethan, which is the guy who was testing, kind of applying some proof of concept and things like that, we realized pretty fast that on the cleaning process and like actually optimizing the data, like he's like, I have no idea how to do that. We're like, that's interesting because like that seems pretty easy to us at this point. So that was kind of the first building block. And then we realized like when we just stack all these lists together, like some of these list sizes are massive and like we don't have the marketing output to even get close to that.
Yeah.
So then it became like how much more efficient can we really make this? And then that was when we were like, I was just looking up ways to do that. I stumbled on AI machine learning. And when I was in college, which I dropped out at the time, but the first 2 years I was studying computer science and accounting. So like I understood like conceptually like what AI machine learning could do. So then we really started taking like the, that whole process that I outlined and then overlaying the AI machine learning aspects at like the most basic level. So it's like, if there are 5 attributes of like list stacking here, that would be moved up the rung as far as like the modeling goes. And then we realized like, oh, we can start like talking about like age and like, just basic like demographic things.
Right.
And then it just kept growing and growing and growing. And then we realized like this could be a product. So the same people that we were trying to get funding from for the real estate side, we were like, instead of that, can we just get funding for Dataflick? And the big thing that was huge at that point was not necessarily getting the funding to run Dataflick, but it was getting that marketing budget to do extensive testing like on the models we were creating.
Right.
So we were spending at peak maybe like 40, 50,000 a month in marketing. And it wasn't necessarily to generate wholesale deals or real estate deals in general, but it was more of optimizing the systems to be like ready for production for other users and things like that. And this whole concept or process is taking place like mid 2020 all the way up into September of 2021 when Dataflick actually launched.
Got it.
So it was in R&D for about a year and a half, roughly.
So you're doing R&D with your own data that you guys were compiling.
Correct.
And you guys were running your wholesaling business.
Correct.
Based off this data, as well as Ethan and a couple other people.
Yes. It got to the point where eventually we found it more valuable for all our time to be in that data side. And like we do our testing through those money partners from then on. Because obviously we still need to test everything. We need to make sure it works.
Right.
And like we talked before the show, but like focus, we think is pretty much everything. So we're like, we probably should like really focus on Dataflick if we're, gonna like be serious about it as opposed to just the housing side. And it's been super tempting, obviously, this whole time to like launch a housing company. But
we've probably had hundreds of conversations about, well, what if just one mailer,
just like
right?
one little campaign here. So like it was important for us to almost like launch Dataflick by testing it in different places like all around the US. So it was great because we learned so much so fast because we were having like these in-depth conversations with all these people testing the systems, and that was just invaluable, like testing to make Dataflick kind of what it is today, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you're saying September of last year or 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
September 2 years ago is when you guys officially launched Dataflick. And it was about a year and a half of testing with other people. So how many clients, quote unquote clients, right? Partners, whatever you guys want to call it, were you working with before you launched it?
There was probably about 5, and we strategically like placed them in different areas in the U.S. So like Florida, upstate New York, Columbus in the Midwest, and we had a couple people testing in Las Vegas, but we had some people doing California stuff, but it was just kind of all over the place at the time for them because of COVID and the housing market and everything. So it was really hard to get like reliable, testing there. But the goal was to just be in as many places in the U.S. as we could be for testing.
And on top of that, one of the most beautiful things about AI and machine learning is if it's a true deep learning model, it will improve over time. It will get better and better over time. So like the version we were way back then for those people in Las Vegas versus where we are now is like night and day. Truly.
Sure.
Right. So talk to me about that experience, like launching it. Like when you say launch it, make it an official business, what does that mean exactly?
Yes. So it was the 2 money partners I'm talking about are in a group called We Buy Houses. So it's a We Buy Houses conference. There were about 15, 20 investors there.
I think 2025, something like that.
Okay.
So imagine like just like a standard like 2-day event kind of thing.
And I remember it was our first time ever even talking to a group that size, right? Much less actually pitching Dataflick. So I was living in Ty's rental at the time. It was me and him there. He was house hacking. And he was in one room, I was in another. We had our script of our PowerPoint and we were just pacing, rehearsing for hours and hours on end. So nervous for this very first pitch. But from that, we got like 5 users and that was the start of it all.
Got it. Okay. So then what has it been like since you started it? Because this is a completely different venture, right? Like you guys worked at a smaller wholesaling company. And then you guys, now there's a completely different environment.
Very different. Yeah.
What was it like launching this?
So obviously we're super in education. So we're in a ton of other like communities that are more on like the software side. So that was a whole other journey that we were kind of going down because it's like, we need to know a lot about housing, but we also need to know a lot about launching a software company. So like during this whole time of R&D period, we were almost prepping the launch for that as well. And, making hires and things like that. So when we launched, it happened very fast. Like September of 2021, the first 3 months were pretty slow, but a year later we were occupying, because we sell by a county license. So we had about 185 counties occupied in 12 months and we grew like 600% in 12 months. So that whole process from a like learning curve perspective, but also like growth pains was, it was super exciting at the time, but like looking back, it's very stressful.
Really thinking about it now, it seems like the very common theme with us is get thrown in the fire and make it work, right?
Sure.
Do you guys experience doubt along the way?
Oh, yeah.
What kind of doubts?
So mix of doubt and what's it called? Essentially wondering if you deserve to be where you are, right?
Imposter syndrome was pretty real at the time, I
Exactly.
think.
Yeah.
Right. Like this is our first time working with this many people, really trying to service them all, make them see the best. So if for some reason the data wasn't working for them or their callers weren't performing right, for me as the acquisitions and customer success, I took a pretty big toll on me mentally, right? That's what kept me up at night, being like, how can I get this better? What is really the missing link with their data?
Yeah, 100%.
And who helped you guys along the way?
So we talk a lot about this too, but like we have some amazing support from like friends, family, and just like everyone in our lives. Like, you know, obviously there's a lot of skepticism because a lot of our friends and family weren't very entrepreneurial. So like a lot of this, they're like, what's wholesaling? Or like, you guys are doing real estate, but you're also doing software. Like it was a very like, you know, tough transition for people to kind of see, but regardless of that, they were always very supportive. And like, I don't think we would have made it without like a lot of that.
Yeah.
There's them and like the people who helped us in the industry, right?
Yeah.
Like once again, starting off and kind of growing up through it. Tiff and Josh were really there. Tyler Evans and Ren with like Padley and Cameron Hall, they have been great supporters as well. Cameron loves testing.
Yeah.
That is his favorite thing on earth. He's like, oh, you have this idea? Yeah, give it to me. Oh yeah, you want to try that? Please.
Yeah.
So on the business side, having those partners who do support us on the money side, but also the testing and pushing us further and further. But as he said too, like without the family and friends support being like, you guys are going to do it. You're going to make it. The company's going to do great. Just keep going.
Yeah.
That's been a massive piece.
What were some of the biggest wins that you guys have experienced along the way?
I mean, to touch on the real estate aspect too, like we were doing these test sequences ourselves sometimes as well, but they're very small like campaigns. So an example of this is we had a handwriting machine that we put in our house. So if you don't know what that is, it's basically a big, almost like 3D printer, and it holds a pen and actually handwrites letters for you.
It's actually a company right here.
We just heard about it.
Yeah, we were talking to them like right before.
Yeah. So yeah, they're a nationwide provider. So they were talking about they were part of, what was it? There's some big real estate educator, like traditional real estate they're working with.
So there's no doubt in my mind, those handwriting machines are so much more advanced than ours was.
Yeah, this is like the cheapest version. We're like, let's test it. I mean, it could be fun. So yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
We're living together at that time, right? It's us and two other roommates. We turned the sunroom into our office. You walk in and there's just boxes and boxes of envelopes, paper, random pens. And we would give the machine the pen, plug it through the software to where it's literally handwriting it itself, but you'd have to keep watch over it. Because if that pen ran out of ink, it would go through another 20 envelopes of just like dry
Scratching it?
writing.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And then we bought a pretty crappy as well, but $200 folding machine that we would then run these through. That would get jammed 50% of the time. And we were hand stuffing all of these. Like it was
Hand stamping, like everything.
It was a nightmare. But
regardless, this win though. So we did like a 3,000 to 5,000 record campaign.
Very small.
Super small. And it was taking like just some of our testing data. And we launched this campaign. First like week and a half, we get an insane deal. And it was a 28K wholesale. And that was like because at that point, like we've been testing Dataflick for like 6 months. And then just to see this, first try, 5,000 mailers, 28,000. And that was, I mean, you know how it goes. Like from there on, we're like, okay, like we can do this. Like
We have something.
Yeah, it changed like the entire perspective because we were like, we can do this. Like it makes sense.
so that's a great win on the actual
Real estate
side. On the data side, it's probably, so we're able to look at the past transactions that occur and how many that are on our list. Essentially having a governance of how well we're performing in that county, seeing that number rise, like the big jumps, that those are huge for me.
Yeah.
And this is like in terms of like the precision and accuracy of like, say there were 100 transactions in a county last month. Like how many did we predict? How big was the list size? How efficient were we? Like metrics of performance, like for our models, which is an interesting like KPI segment that like we have.
Pretty nerdy win, but big win for me.
Oh, that's a massive win, right? I mean, because one of the things that we talked about prior to the show was, you're able to predict about 71%
Correct.
of the homeowners is going to sell.
Correct.
On the investor transactions for
Yeah.
that 71%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then on like listings, it's about like 60 to 65, depending on the area.
Right. So you were talking about governance, which is a word I've never heard inside of real estate. Right. So talk to me about what governance is.
Right. So in machine learning, there are tons of models that are curated for almost like fact checking. So it's like, if X happens, then we know from that we need to like, hey, someone go look at this internally from like our data science team. So if say we have a county and last month that the list size was 50,000, but next month, before we like launch to a user, the list size is 200,000. So it detects these anomalies of governance to make sure like, hey, we're doing something right, or hey, we're doing something wrong, and we need to have a team member go look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So we overlay that technology into all of our users' counties as well. So like before they get a list, all of these governance like checks are created based on like the models themselves. So that could be list size. If last month the accuracy was lower than like what we wanted it to be, things like that. And it gets very, very granular when you're talking about like, so if we have a transaction or not a transaction, but if we see any inaccuracy in our database compared to like the county auditor, like we have all of those metrics going as well, just to make sure people are getting really accurate data.
Yeah.
As far as like the homeowner information, things like that. So there are dozens of these governance models.
And on top of that, so that's governance on the machine learning side, right? There's also governance on that actual real estate side. And I apply that more to making sure that person's a right fit for that list size and the amount of transactions occurring, right? If you go into a massive county like we're in Maricopa, it has 1.5 million total residential properties or something crazy like that, right? That's going to be a massive list to get through. If you have one or two callers or something like that, you're just not going to efficiently get through that.
Yeah.
So that's another form of governance we can kind of apply on the beforehand to make sure, hey, even before you sign up with us, let's make sure what you're wanting is realistic.
Sure. So, we're talking about machine learning, and then on top we talk about AI, and right now AI is a really hot topic. Before we get into AI and how to use it, I just want to get, just touch on the difference between machine learning and AI, because it seems to me when I hear marketing and people talking about this, it's the same thing when it's not.
It is not the same thing.
Can you touch on that, please?
The simplest way to understand it is, so AI is trying to replicate human-like behavior, artificial intelligence. So it would be like almost like how a human would. So ChatGPT is obviously a very, very hot topic.
Right.
So that an AI example of that is the conversational ability that has. And if you don't know what ChatGPT is, it's essentially a conversational AI tool where you can have conversations about whatever topic that you need help with. So it's like, hey, ChatGPT, can you help me write this SEO article? And it's like, sure, what are we writing about? So things like that. So that is an example of how artificial intelligence is mimicking human behavior. Whereas machine learning more talks about actual predictive technology. So the most common way to do this is something called a regression model. A regression model just talks about, here are all the things that historically have happened, and it can be anything about data or events, things like that. And the machine learning aspect of it is predicting what would happen based on historical data of a concept.
Right.
So when we're combining all of these technologies together, there are tons of use cases and, hundreds.
Oh, we're going to talk about a lot of this.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But that is like the simplest way. And it gets very, very granular from there.
At a high level, AI is trying to get the computer to act like a person would.
Correct.
With the data. Machine learning is just give it all the data in the world and have it try to give us the best guess on future data.
Exactly.
Correct.
So an example, like very, very simple for like real estate. So we're using AI to analyze like demographical behavior as an example. So like here are the events that are happening in someone's life. And based on like human behavior in the past, this is what would have someone sell, also based on a machine learning model, which is the historical data of transactions that actually happened. Just like as a use case for like how our models work.
Right. And then as far as Dataflick, then the way you guys work is based off of machine learning.
Correct. And we're overlaying some AI elements that are almost taking like the human behavior concepts of like life events that are in people's lives, and then tailoring that with our machine learning models based on the historical data.
Okay. So then I guess the first question then, right? I mean, I imagine other people would want to ask you. There's a lot of data providers out there. I've talked about a lot of them. Why Dataflick?
You want to handle it?
Yeah, I'll take it. So for us, and once again, difference between that AI and actual machine learning. There aren't a ton of companies out there actually doing that AI paired with machine learning aspect to create predictive analysis. And you can stack a ton of data, you can do all that, which is great. And if you can do it right, you can target a ton of people. 100% get in front of the right people. Our whole mission statement, our whole goal is to cut that down while still actually getting in front of the right people, right? So a huge part of this gets into marketing dollars. How we said that's a really big overhead. Mailers go anywhere from 50 cents to $1.50.
Right.
Text costs money, all that good stuff. If we can cut that down by providing just better upfront data. Now, I always describe the data as the gas to the car, right?
Yeah.
You still need the tires, engine, transmission, etc. But what you put in definitely will come back out on that back end as well.
So it's different octane. Yes.
100%.
It's true.
So I'm going to speak what I know, and you tell me where I got the data wrong, right? So you look at, there's Bash, there's PropStream, there's 80/20, a big fan of them. Invest Machine, a big fan of them, right? Those are great data providers, and Property Radar as well, right? So you got like the tiers, they're like $100 to $200 a month, right? And you got the higher tiers, you got 80/20 and Investor Machine. And my understanding of those is they're pulling public record directly, right? Like the counties or wherever else the public records are coming from. And you got Audantic, which has been the big bad boy for the longest time, right? And my understanding from them is machine learning, right? It's that regression model we're talking about is that here are all the people that sold to a cash investor. Here are their 400 data points or whatever it is, approximately, from public records. Not public records, from other data companies.
Raw data providers.
Right?
Yeah.
Data brokers.
From data brokers, there you go, right? Whether it's Melissa data, Adam data, whatever, right? They're pulling all the data points and then saying, based off of the people that sold in the past, here are the people that will probably sell given their current data points. Is Dataflick basically replicating that model?
So we parse it out so we have two primary flagship products. So it's our realtor product and our investor product.
Sure.
So the machine learning aspect of this, to talk about like the regression models. So first we're going to look at the realtor product. These are all the people who sold on market through the MLS. Very different group of people who are selling.
Well, they're very different data points.
Exactly. So we're taking those two pillars of data, and that is our regression models for specifically each product respectively. So it's like, here are all the people who sold off market to an investor. Here are all the people who sold on market with a realtor. So that is our training data. And I have no idea what other providers or what other companies do, but the way we do it is we have kind of three pillars. So it's our housing data and our demographical data, and then all of our skip tracing sources. We could touch on the skip tracing, but for now, let's focus on just the actual property data and the demographical data. So in totality, there's roughly about 900 attributes per household that we're tracking.
900?
900.
Okay.
And that's everything from income modeling all the way to like education and life events and things like that. So it's like, hey, based on the last 5 years, like this is the kind of trajectory of like this person has moved up in housing. Like they went from an apartment they're renting all the way to like, a upper middle class home. So all of those life events, all that demographical data modeled into, those 400 demographical attributes. And then we're taking all of these property characteristics from like tax assessors and mortgage recorder databases and things like that. So we take both of those and then apply the historical data for each of those respectively. And then we model all that and put it into a score from 0 to 100. The higher the score, the more likely they are to sell. So internally, we're running about 8 different models to come up with that one score that like our users actually see. So it's very complicated.
So there's a score based off the person's data points.
Correct. So
there's a score based off of the house. or the
Correct.
or property they live in.
100%. Yep. So there's a lot of commonalities out there between the average length that a house actually gets purchased to when it gets resold and things like that. And obviously that will vary depending the county, depending the area, price point, etc. But that's the thing our systems really look into and track.
Is it looking at that? And I'm asking this is very selfishly because I've used you guys here in Maricopa County. Does it say then with your machine learning data that, because you were saying we have 190 different predominant neighborhoods here. What was it?
Oh yeah. So there's 119 neighborhoods in Maricopa, primary. So if you were to take the top 25 neighborhoods based on investor transactions, they occupy 70% of the total investor transactions that actually happen.
Like the 80-20 rule.
Exactly.
Right? So we got 25.
Yep.
So of those 25, you guys have in your data modeled that we have a faster turnover in these 25 neighborhoods versus the other of the remaining 119.
To a degree, right? So we're making these predictions. I'm not going to say like everything I tell you right now is 100% truth. Go with it. But to a degree, we can almost hypothesize based off what's happened in the past and that historical data.
Okay, so I guess another way to ask the question is, talking about the modeling data, like based off the house, is it like in Maricopa County, are we using this one thing where like we say, I don't know what the number is in Maricopa County right now, but everyone says, somewhere like around 7 years, right? Home ownership.
5 to 7 years, pretty average.
Right. So are we saying 7 years of home ownership for all Maricopa County? Or do you say like, hey, in this neighborhood is 7 years, this neighborhood is 3 years? I'm just seeing how granular you're getting with this.
So we have 4 levels of neighborhoods.
Okay.
So it's macro, standard neighborhood, and then it goes to sub-neighborhood and subdivision. So every one of those like subsected levels, they all have their own metrics of performance that we're also tracking and overlaying in.
Got it. And then another question I have is because we had Robert Wensley on the show, right, with Investor Lift. That guy is freaking genius, right? And one thing he was talking about is Facebook has this profile for you and all your life events so that when you do sign up for Facebook, it already has this data. I think they called it ghost data, if I recall correctly.
Yep, ghost data.
Right. With your guys' data, do you guys have a snapshot of this person today, or do you have this person's life event? Like life story in your database.
I know you can explain the lookalike style.
Yeah, I would say a mix. So we definitely have pretty up-to-date data on that demographic side, but also we are looking at years of historical data as well because we need that build-out. Now, a really cool thing that some of our users are doing is with Facebook's lookalike audience. For people who don't know what that is, let's say you have 10 profiles. Facebook can go through and say we found A, B, and C are very common across 10. So we're going to find 10 new ones to reach out to, right? Pretty simple. People are able to do that with our data. So now you're stacking 2 machine learning models on top of each other to then find new people who are just as likely to transact.
Got it.
We're almost like creating market share. So it's like there may have been 100 transactions last month, but we're giving you the people who also look like those people. So you can almost create more opportunities that way as well.
Yeah. So you're saying you're taking the audience or you're taking the list, motivated homeowners, potential motivated homeowners.
Correct.
Right? People that look like they're going to sell and you're putting that in Facebook. So my question here then is how do we transfer that? Because my understanding with Facebook and lookalike audiences, like when you upload your list, because we've tried doing this, we upload our list, the match rate seems to be consistently not the best, only because when they sign up for Facebook, their email address and data is a little bit different than what we have for them. So how's that match rate looking?
So for us, the way that we tell people to do it, and some like we've heard circumstances where people are like, hey, like, we got all of our lists uploaded. And we've had certain people who are like 30% uploaded, what happened? So we don't exactly know how Facebook does it, obviously, but we tell people to take so on our skip tracing, we have something called the last reported date. And the way that our skip tracing actually works is we buy about 6,000 public and private sources. And that can be everything from a utility bill all the way to a gym membership. And we run the date of birth, first name, last name, and property address through those 6,000 sources. And we say, hey, there's an active account that matches that information, and it was last active on X date.
Yeah.
So our skip tracing will give you the last reported date of that activity date through one of the 6,000 sources.
Yeah.
So from that, we will take, hey, here are the 3 most recent actual last reported dates for each number, upload that into the Facebook custom audience.
Got it.
Because statistically, that has a much higher likelihood to actually find the person than an email does. People do upload 2 emails, but I mean, I have like 8 emails. I don't know how many you have, but it's just unlikely you're going to get the right match, right?
Right. Yeah. So then, going back to you're modeling the person, the property, and you mentioned the skip tracing. How does that
Correct.
How does that become a factor in the likelihood someone's going to sell?
So it's not necessarily the skip tracing database is tying into the likelihood to sell, but we're using AI technology to find the skip tracing numbers.
Got
So
it.
like from those 6,000 sources outlining like the process I just did. So we're saying like, hey, statistically based on historical data, like we've had these people connect with like this last reported date. Because like what we started to do is aggregate actual connects from our users on phone numbers. So it's like, hey, here's this cold calling campaign, and here are all the verified, like this is their phone number, and we're actually tying that data back in as well to try and like increase the accuracy of our skip tracing database. So that's the AI element of that, but it's not necessarily tying back to the likelihood to sell piece.
Got it. Was there something else you want to add to that?
Nah, he covered it pretty well, actually.
All right. So then, hopefully, then we were able to kind of illustrate for everyone that's listening, right? So, because there's all these different data products, I just want to make sure, like, when we're saying what Dataflik is, we're clearly describing it. So it's machine learning based with AI assistance, the how to identify the most likely seller.
Exactly.
Correct.
So, one question we talk a lot about, and this might be a little bit challenging, is like if someone wanted to go and replicate your business, right? Like if someone comes on, like, if someone wants to build a wholesaling business, how are they doing it? So if someone wanted to, compete against Dataflik, right? What are the things that you guys have to figure out along the way to get to where you guys are?
Sure.
Yeah. So we have, during those initial R&D days, we had to completely scratch our whole system.
Like 7 times.
Like this was years of building a year at that point of truly building it out to realize that it wasn't at the level that we needed it to be by any means. Back then we made the mistake of hiring a developer that we shouldn't have, right? We skimped out on price a little because we're starting up, right? Small, trying to be lean.
We've done that.
Yeah.
of
Get a little
course.
greedy on it. Yeah, that makes sense.
But to actually get to the point we are now, it's been a very long journey of a ton of trial and error and a lot of funding.
Yeah.
So the other aspect that's pretty interesting. So everyone talks a lot about machine learning, how it improves month over month because you get more data and like it just improves month over month. And so I'm a big proponent of like the economic moat. If you're familiar with the concept, those who aren't, it's basically this is your company and like how can we build a moat around this company to keep other people away from it.
Sure.
So our best moat is building that historical database because you can't get it unless you're actively like storing it month over month. So for someone to even try to copy it, they're first going to have to get all of that historical data. And by the time that they get to where we are today, we're obviously going to be like that much further ahead.
That's the argument that's been made, like supposedly why no one will ever catch Tesla, is that
exactly.
even though they have I don't think they have any patents, right? Like everything's like open records. Like here's how you
They
build a
open
car
source
battery.
it. Yeah.
Here's how you build our car batteries, right? Here's exactly how to do it.
Yeah. Good luck.
But they have been tracking all the driving behavior for AI and autopilot. So they have all the records stored on how to, they've recorded all this driving behavior. And that's supposedly their advantage.
Yes.
So that being said, that makes total sense to me. But if someone were to try to compete against you, right? First thing you guys did was the funding. And then you guys started buying data.
Yes.
So you have to buy data from how many different data brokers are you guys buying from?
We have about 14,000 sources.
14,000 different sources.
Yeah. We spend like 90,000 a month just on raw information.
It's if you're doing this for yourself, unless you plan to take over the whole US, it is
it's not really financially feasible.
Yeah.
Right. So
I guess.
14,000 different data records. Data scientist is something I've heard thrown around a lot. Right. It's like,
Yes.
I've got this many different data scientists working for me. Right. In the conversation we had before the call or before the show, I actually believe you guys have data scientists. Right.
It's true.
So
Yes.
explain to me, or explain for people listening, what a data scientist is, and then how many you guys have.
So for us, their technical titles are machine learning engineers.
Mhm.
So there are three of them just on like that aspect. Data science is more on, so it's like the data science team, and there's like subcategories of people that can kind of go in that. So an example is we have a data engineer. So that person is just handling like data governance.
Yeah.
So it's like, are we aggregating databases together, like cleaning them, making sure they're maintained? Like, so the most common example is, there's probably anywhere from like 1 to 200,000 transactions a month, and all that has to be not only updated but then re-uploaded from model adjustments as well. And month over month, it optimizing on like the other properties who didn't sell and things like that. So that would be like a data engineer, and then a machine learning engineer is someone who just focuses on like actual models based on the regression models we mentioned earlier in the show. So we have 3 machine learning engineers, and they all 3 have PhDs.
Yeah.
So they're pretty talented guys.
They know a thing or two. So going into, we're talking about the title of the show, right? How to use AI to predict your next motivated homeowner. So then how do you use AI to predict your next motivated homeowner?
So
And I know like when we were talking before the show, there's like 4 different applications or 4 different ways we apply AI. So go ahead.
So we have all of our different models that we've, stringing together. So like we have our investor model and then our realtor model. And obviously with the investor side, like we're just using the training data of people who sold off market to an investor, and then all those other sources combining together to almost enrich and like almost uncover insights. It's probably the best way to put
Well, I
it.
guess like, because like prior to the show, one of the cool things I get, and there's an immense benefit for myself, is, the guest comes in and they hang out, and then, they talk to the media team and they talk to my wholesale team. Right. And so like you guys and Bino, our Dispo guy, totally geeked out on how to use AI in Dispo.
Gotcha.
So what were some of the things you were sharing with Bino?
Yeah, so a big thing we talked with him about was ChatGPT and the 4.0 model they just released. These conversational AIs you can do so much with. It's ridiculous. You can use them to format even the emails you're wanting to reach out to these prospects with. If you have the list of your prospects and certain bios or things like that with them, ChatGPT can write out literally individualized emails ready to just send out to all these that you can upload into a blast software, things of that nature, right? So just optimizing that in ways where he can get so much more done in such little time was the main thing we talked about, and he was ecstatic.
So a direct example would be if you're a wholesaler, you have your VIP list, or if you don't, you should. So like here's like your 10 to like 20 best clients, and you should have like maybe deals they bought from you in the past. Maybe it's some bios on them or like their company, things like that. So like I've seen people upload data like that and then automatically spit out like custom tailored messages of, emails of like, hey, here's this deal. Here are all of the property details. So like another example would be I've seen people use it for creating real estate listing descriptions. So you're almost like creating a description for every house that you're trying to dispo while giving them that custom tailored touch of it, like almost customization for that person specifically.
Right.
And this is something that can be done in like 20 emails in 20 seconds, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Probably send
faster.
an email about this property, custom tailored to this person's profile.
Yep. And that's just like dispo for like one very small example, I would say.
And on top of that, you could almost write it out in a way to where so it's a system that can also memorize, right? So if it knows the average buy box of this VIP seller, it can almost auto apply this property that you're looking at to the sellers that actually fit that proper buy box as well, which is just taking a whole nother step further.
And like highlighting the benefits of the property based on the buy box that person wants. And this could all just be in Excel, and you're just like copy and paste it in.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So one thing that's come up, they're talking about how AI is, going to be coming into our industry and disrupting our industry, right? I made the argument that no matter what happens, you still need salespeople, right? Like no matter what happens, you need something on the other end of that homeowner that can demonstrate empathy, something we talked about in the beginning of the show. So I'm hearing people talking right now how they can use AI for texting and cold calling. So what are you guys' thoughts for texting and cold calling?
So text, I think there's a big difference between that initial marketing reach out versus that acquisition manager who's actually showing the empathy and walking them through the deal, right? That's two separate divisions in my mind.
Yeah.
Text is pretty straightforward, I think, though, because if you're looking at conversational AI, if it just has some training data on what your VA or you yourself, these conversations you've had with these people, it can pretty much predict what to say and pump it out to at least get you the lead.
Yeah.
Cold call, that's something we've kind of talked about, and it could be very interesting. So there's certain voice AIs. Right now that's primarily tied around celebrities, and people will make funny videos of like Joe Biden, Barack Obama playing a video game or something, right? But if you can get it to just be a generic voice, that's the primary voice, and you have voice recognition. So essentially the seller, when they say something, you're able to process it, once again, based off that training data, come up with a response that then this AI replies back. You could almost automate cold calling, which is just an insane thing to think about.
Some other like kind of low hanging fruit from that. So obviously people who are cold calling primarily use overseas people to do it. And accents can be an issue or a deterrent to some people that they're prospecting on. So that voice AI technology can combine with a perfect dialect of like whatever accent, whatever language that you want.
Whatever area. If you're in the South, having more of a Southern twang versus New York, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, like that is stuff that exists today 100%.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, to me, like if someone could, if you're using a cold caller overseas and their English is like, you know, comprehensively very good and the dialect is, or, you know, just how they speak is the issue, that can be fixed.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, you know, it changes everything, I think.
Like to get an American cold caller, it's like $15, $20 an hour versus
Plus
a
commission
VA
typically
being
too.
6, 7.
Right.
Now you're able to do that, fixing that accent piece and having them still be great at their job, which they are.
So what I'm hearing right now is the texting component, the initial outbound texting component, and the first couple of replies. You believe that could be done right now?
100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I actually just thought about, as you said that, so I don't know about you guys, but when we were doing the texting, I absolutely hated writing all of the templates that the texting platform had to use because you have to have such a large variance for it to not get blocked as spam.
Not to get caught by the carriers.
Exactly. And I mean, you could literally give a list of the blacklisted words they're not supposed to use, and it would produce 200 variations of that
Perfectly.
in like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And like that would have taken us hours.
For perspective, we suck at writing. I will say that. Like, that's just not our forte, not our go-to. Our website was mainly written by AI, fun fact.
Yeah.
But that's still a challenging thing that I think a lot of people deal with, how to get that initial touch out while not getting blocked by the carriers, things of that nature.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a phenomenal application.
So maybe this would be a new venture after this episode. The three of us can do something
Yeah.
out like that. So that's for the initial text blast.
Yes.
So what are some other applications? So we just talked about Dispo a little bit. What are some other applications potentially using AI for acquisitions?
I saw a really cool startup. Can't mention them because I know they are. So they were doing a pre-seed funding for. It's actually a really cool concept, but they were tailoring people who would call like a suicide prevention hotline, and you know the big issue with that is when that person receives that call, it's very, very serious, right? So guiding that conversation correctly is crucial, and their whole niche started out to be like, let's focus on this, you know, conversation. And as it's happening in live time, an AI system will say, hey, here's how you should definitely like steer this conversation based on all the historical data that it's been compiled with.
All right. It's kind of like using Gong AI.
Yes, I've seen some stuff about them as well. So they were like, that was their original like purpose. They made a massive pivot because they realized they're, you know, not very strong market there, and they switched it to sales. So as you're having a conversation through acquisitions for virtually anything, you could set the parameters beforehand and say like, hey, here is a company that is doing B2B sales for, I don't know, logistics. And so in that niche, let's say that we here's all this training data on calls that we've seen in the past for this, and every objection is being handled based on like, hey, here are the 3 ways that you can respond to that objection on a sales call in live time. So if you overlaid that kind of technology on the acquisition side, I mean, I think it would streamline training. Like, I don't know the percentage, but it would be rapid improvement, I think.
On the acquisition side, but also if you apply that to the initial with the callers, once again.
Yeah,
if you're not going all the way to automate your callers, right? But just having them, because training callers, you're generally relying on a manager or you have them in-house, which takes a lot of time. But they're able to have a live time script being printed out that they can just follow along with. That's half the battle.
So we have in our organization, Ian, right? He's the first guy we actually hired to be part of one of our sales trainers, right? And he was screwing around one day. And he's like, let's make some videos, right? And he's like, I think it was Jasper is what he was like, hey, Jasper, how would Steve Trang answer this question? And there's enough data out there of me where he gave an answer, and he's like, that's exactly.
It's pretty close, right?
How's he would answer that question? Like, dang, that's crazy. That's what's out there.
Yeah.
So you and I had a conversation before about one other application, is that salespeople are notorious for not taking great notes.
No, terrible. I'm still bad about it.
Yeah. And so we were talking about an application that we could have it where the call is recorded, I think using CallRail.
Yes.
Right. And it's sent to ChatGPT, and then it would transcribe it and give bullet point notes into the CRM.
There are so many companies that
I was about to say, so this is actually getting very, very common. Even Zoom has like a Otter.ai application.
Well, that's just a transcription.
Exactly.
But a bullet point summary.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like not only summaries I've seen like action items and like levels of improvement based on the call if it's a sales call, which is like, that's insane. Because like even from like a sales perspective, if you're a sales manager, you can almost like get all that information and then just use that to streamline, like just focusing on like improving your salespeople as opposed to like listening to every call, and like it just is very tedious. And like that could be applied for cold callers especially, because like I've definitely seen and heard complaints about people saying like, hey, these cold call notes are terrible. And not anymore. So that's just like a few things I think you could overlay. And all that technology like exists right now, 100%.
Yeah. And then another thing we were talking about is, you guys have, how many clients do you guys have now?
About 70, 75-ish.
Yeah, across about
And,
180 counties.
Yeah.
Like that.
And your product's not, the cheapest. Right?
It's not.
It's
not
So, so you get to talk to operators that are doing real business. So what are you guys finding is the most effective use, right? So they've got the data, they're buying the data from you guys. What is the most effective way of using it? And I'm asking this because you had suggested prior to the show that cold calling is not the most effective.
Yes.
So what are the best ways to leverage the data? So I've gone to Dataflick, I bought the data. What is the best way to actually use the data?
Definitely. So cold call has its place, right? In terms of efficiently getting through a list to capture that market share, that's where it really lacks, unless you have like 15 callers.
Yeah.
Right? Because then you're making up the ground, but that can get pricey. For us, it's very much omnichannel or multi-channel marketing, where you are hitting these people from just the angle that they are most likely to respond to. And of course, predicting that is a pretty hard thing to initially do.
Yeah.
So hitting them from all those angles is almost pretty crucial. If I know on my list in the past 3 months, we've predicted 70% of these transactions that occurred, which is our average, it's just getting in front of them. And that's why we include that skip tracing in our service to kind of encourage that as well.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is we really want you to be able to have that marketing dollars and have that angle to get in front of them the best they
So
can.
let's talk about the what that means then, right? Omnipresence. right? Because obviously, the more ways you get in front of them, the more effective. And it's cumulative, right? If you can get in front of multiple channels, all the channels are more effective.
100%.
So when you're saying omnipresent, like what are the different channels you guys are recommending?
Definitely. So the most common one that I see people use today are callers and texters, right? Text is pretty efficient with getting through a list for the price, 100%. But building out your brand is actually a really important piece because that's going to affect these response rates in general. So for direct mail, for example, on postcards, I've seen people pair it with their TV commercials, and it'll go from a 0.5% response rate to about a 2%, which for postcards is pretty massive, depending the area you're in, of course. So building out that way to where you're getting that inbound flow and outbound flow to that pretty high degree is pretty important, in my opinion.
So that's TV and direct mail. Right? So things we talk about is TV, direct mail, texting, and cold calling. Am I missing anything, or is that all of them?
Touch on the geofencing as well.
You can take that.
So like something that's in beta right now is there's a concept called geofencing. For those who don't know what that is, that's essentially drawing almost like a polygon or targeting a very specific area geographically. Yeah. And when someone goes in that area, or if they have gone in this geographic area, people do ads towards it. So like I've seen this from anywhere from like, say Dick's Sporting Goods. There's a fishing department. And they can actually track if someone has gone specifically in that fishing department, then they will send like actual ads catered to fishing. So that would be like an example of like an e-commerce use case. But for us, we've been like beta testing with a couple different users. Like say we have this property address. As soon as they cross that boundary of the actual polygoned area of their address and mailing address specifically, just because they live there, they will start to get tailored ads that are specifically focusing, the highest level would be focusing on the distress factor that they're actually experiencing. Yeah. So like say it was bankruptcy, you would have an ad that's, lightly touching on bankruptcy, just to make it feel like very personalized to them. So that helps build a ton of brand equity. This is also more on the realtor side too, but like if they're seeing you virtually everywhere, and then you send a direct mail piece, or then you cold text them, it's amazing results. Right. So like eventually that's kind of like where we're going as a company, is to focus less on like, here's like one campaign that works. But if you don't want to do an omni-channel approach, then we're probably not like the best fit for you in general. Because I think like from a saturation perspective, if you're not like doing omni-channel at this point, I think that it's going to be very, very hard to build like predictability. And you probably see that more than I do.
Oh, 100%. The amount of time someone will have one or two cold callers, we kind of talked about this already, right? And going to like Maricopa, saying, oh yeah, I can hit up that whole area with one caller. You're just not going to match the person doing 7 different marketing campaigns. Right. Never will.
So the argument here then is, what you were just suggesting a moment ago, is if I'm going to buy the data from Dataflick, I should be prepared to call them, texting, mail them, and then at some point geofence.
Exactly.
Marketing.
And even like if you have creative ways yourself that I haven't mentioned here, that you think, oh, maybe I can do this and change it up and get ahead of the competition. Like that's not a bad thing in my opinion at all.
It's interesting. We've seen some people do really well with door knocking, actually.
Yes.
It's hard to build a team that wants to do that, but if you can get the right hires there, I mean, we've seen like 2-3 deals a week come from door knocking for people, because they're just taking like a foreclosure list or like a very, very high like distressed list, overlaying it with the AI of like, this person's the most likely to sell that's also going through foreclosure. Door knocking them 1 out of every 10 is like a legit opportunity. Yeah. So it can get very, very granular very fast. I think there's probably like 15 to 20 different sources that you could do, from like SEO, PPC, YouTube ads. It just depends on like how big you want to get and like how, what the budget is, obviously.
And just to really dive a little bit deeper into this, we're talking about geofencing. For those that aren't familiar with the application, right? Like when I first heard about geofencing, it was basically like you go to a hotel conference, right? Now you're getting retargeted for like all the different products that they were selling at that hotel conference.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and it doesn't matter if your phone was somewhere inside that building, then after you left that building, you're getting retargeted for weeks to buy whatever products they were pitching at at that
Exactly.
event. So for you guys, I get some data from DataFlik. I know where they live. If their phone or the computer, obviously the computer's not leaving, but if their phone was inside their house, we are retargeting them on their device, Hulu, Peacock, whatever
Streaming services.
streaming services they're watching. We were sending them video ads onto their device on whatever platforms they're on.
Video ads, banner ads,
Display ads.
Yeah.
essentially whatever fits in that budget of marketing so we can hit them efficiently enough to really build that brand awareness.
Yeah. And it's obscene what we're talking about here because Hulu is not very expensive to market on, right?
Yeah, so the average cost in our testing campaign was 10,000 records for $3,500. So about
Yeah.
35 cents a hit.
But to create the illusion of being everywhere, right?
Very powerful.
Because if you want to market on TV, I mean, you're starting at 10,000 a month.
Exactly.
Starting, right? You're hitting a lot of people, but you're starting at 10,000. But in our market, I mean, Doug Hopkins is like the biggest fish, right? He's the Hulk in our pond.
Yep.
I believe he's spending like $100,000 a month. But to create the illusion of being everywhere,
Very powerful.
And this is so powerful because that illusion builds that, once again, brand authority. So once you're tying this with those other marketing channels, you're going to see an increase in those as well.
yeah,
And like, I think it's super important to almost position your outreach to like play on that. It's like, hey, I don't know if you've seen us around. I don't know if you got our mailer. It's like lightly touching it. And like, I think in our first like beta test, it was like 2 weeks of geofence targeting and of the 10,000, and the first week of cold calling, there are like 4 legit opportunities.
yeah.
And generally about 50% close rate with that group. Yeah.
So like, it's almost like taking cold calling, texting, direct mail, and every other like channel that's outbound to like the next level.
Well, this is definitely the next level, and this is something I actually looked at a long time ago. You know, so I'm kind of curious how you guys are able to do it because I looked into geofencing years ago, right? And for me, when I was looking at it, I was like, okay, so we can pull their IP address, and from the IP address, we can have an idea where they live. But when we were doing it, it was like a 5-mile radius. Like this is completely useless information.
Useless. Yeah.
Right.
And for us, we're almost doing it the other way around, right? Instead of tracking IP address first, we're doing it based off that mail address.
Yeah. So how are you guys able to pull? Are you guys pulling an IP address, or what do you guys?
So we're using like essentially, and this is also like we're launching an entire division for this. By no means am I an expert in this, but that's why we're hiring the people that are. So we are using a polygon system, which is basically the boundary lines of the surveyed area for a property address. So the second an active IP address that is on this platform crosses that boundary, that makes them, game to market to essentially. And from that, like you can really tailor like, hey, here's what we're like, this person's been hit. Let's do retargeting towards them. So like an interesting metric that we track from a KPI perspective on this test sequences was how many people saw this ad, typed in our like the company name and the URL as an example. So now we're getting them on the website. Now we can retarget them on Facebook, YouTube, everything.
Yeah.
But that's like, I mean, we're doing this at the highest level on that kind of stuff, but that's not where we're starting.
Yeah, and adding to that, right? We're talking about doing this on that very high level. Once you know, like, oh, we got this many impressions, this many people interacted with the ad, this many people went to Google and searched our name after seeing the ad, etc. In terms of retargeting with mailers and stuff, those solid 700 people, that's a very small list. You can send very high quality mailers to them at that
We're
point.
gonna definitely go door knock those guys.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
what I was saying. Yeah, you gotta get in front of them, right? Because
Yeah.
if they typed in your name after seeing that, they're obviously thinking about it.
They're raising their hand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You can't raise your hand any more than that.
truly.
Without literally typing in your name, email, and becoming a lead.
Yeah.
And to like build off that brand equity piece, like we're big fans of the month-over-month improvement, obviously. So like the longer you do this, the more brand equity you build and the more trust you naturally build. And that's pretty invaluable, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, adding to that, actually. So you said you've done geofencing before. It was kind of a nightmare, right?
Well, no, I saw how my accuracy. I was like, I'm not putting a dollar.
Not really. Yeah.
Fair. The guy we're bringing on, he's did geofencing before, right? He's an expert in the field. That's what we want. Essentially, he was like, yeah, with a $3,500 budget, don't expect anything until like month 2, right? Because it's really building that up, that stack effect. Once he utilized our list with it, he immediately saw 3 times higher impression rate, 3 times higher Google search, etc. And after the first week of calling those 2-week ads, they may get 2 deals.
Yeah.
So it's almost like we're completing each other in a pretty nice middle ground.
Well, and what you guys have done in a way is you guys have taken outbound data, because that's what we do, right? We buy data and we outbound market to it.
Yep.
And we turn that outbound data into inbound marketing, right? So, like we mail to them and they call us, but it's still like a lot of outbound effort.
Sure.
It doesn't feel like they called us until we market it to them.
Yeah.
Here, it feels like they marketed to us, or they reached out to us unsolicited, even though they're totally solicited.
Right. It feels a lot better, like for the homeowner, I think.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh yeah, I've seen this guy's stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Different vibes for sure.
Completely different vibes, and then dramatically improves the quality of the lead.
100%.
And like, to be honest, I think when they engage after that cold call, it really shows like they're probably more serious too, which I think is really important to note, because we get so many people get tire kickers on like call and text, I think.
Yeah.
And
The quality of the appointment is way lower on cold calling.
yeah, I mean, I think industry standard last I checked was like 1 out of every 55 cold call text leads.
Closer to 80. on
Yeah,
cold call.
just depends. But like mail is like 1 out of every 8. So way, way better. A lot less resources needed.
Yeah. So I definitely want to get to the audience questions. Before we do that, you mentioned something funny earlier about the Grinch.
Yes. Okay. So this mainly applies to AI driven lists where there's market share on that list, right? But it's a concept I call perceived distress. So essentially how it works is, let's say you have the Grinch and you have Cindy Lou Who. Now the Grinch has a judgment, pre-foreclosure, criminal felony, short-term loan, everything under the sun, right? Our system is definitely going to rank him higher versus Cindy Lou who just has a lien. Even though our system ranks him higher, that lien could be all she needs to sell, hence the perceived distress level. Because of that, in terms of cutting down lists, getting them to fit people's capability to get through the list, that efficiency rate, right? It's very important to go first off their buy box, then really targeting the areas that we're actually seeing transactions that are actually worth hitting to cut down the list that way while still capturing the most amount of market share we can.
Yeah.
And that's the whole concept behind perceived distress.
I think too, like when people get so distressed that like, I mean, where are they going to go, right? Like, how are they going to get another place? Like, if they have all of these issues, like, they're not going to be able to rent an apartment. Like, they're not going to be able to buy another house and stuff like that. So, like, at some point, they become so distressed that, like, they physically can't sell, even though they probably want to.
Unless there's a creative solution.
Right. And, like, we have people who are, like, just going after, like, sub-twos right now because I think the last episode that you guys did with Tim Harridge, like, 2 episodes ago, like, he was talking about how much like equity is available, but also like how good of rates people have in the total US and like just targeting like those kinds of people, and I think that doing that kind of targeting really gets around like the whole issue about them being too distressed as well.
Yeah.
Just having a lot of like arrows in your quiver, if you will.
Right. So I see a lot of interesting questions here. So right before we go to all the questions, we're just going to quick video here, and then we'll get to everyone's questions.
Wholesalers, what if you can make an extra $50,000 a month, which is simple to do if you can close an extra 2 to 3 deals every single month. Right now, you might be walking out of houses without signed contracts, sellers are ghosting you, or even when you do get a signed contract, the seller wants to cancel before closing. And you're probably wondering, why is this happening? And it's because you're not following a sales process. And if you keep going the way you're going, you'll continue leaving 2 to 3 deals on the table every single month. After attending our live event, you'll quickly be equipped with all the tools to handle any objection thrown at you. People that attend our live events repeatedly tell us that they're closing an extra $50,000 to $70,000 instantly. Here, you'll learn how to ask better questions that engage the sellers, the skills to build real rapport, and the ability to pinpoint exactly where the appointment went wrong. Come to my office in Phoenix, Arizona, and spend 2 full days with me and my team where we discuss our entire sales process. Learn how to overcome I need to think about it, the price is too low, and any hidden third-party decision makers. And if you attend this event, we're also including our disposition sales training, our perfect seller appointment checklist, and all of our scripts. Act now because our live events fill up quickly as we can only fit 20 people. If at the end of our event, you don't see how you can make an extra $50,000, I'll give you your money back. Go to salesdisruptors.com and sign up now, because if you don't, you're going to keep leaving money on the table. FYI, we can only seat 20 people, and we've already sold a bunch of seats. So don't get left behind in our shifting industry.
All right, so we got Danny Fee in Vegas saying this conversation is fire. Thank you, Danny. I was really looking forward to this, and I think it's really timely. You know, like there are a lot of people that suddenly became AI experts overnight. It kind of reminds me. So I started real estate in 2007. You know, and
Great time to start.
Yeah, great time to start. All right, a lot of stress, a lot of unnecessary scar tissue still from those times. But in that time, you know, they were saying social media is the next thing and video is the next thing. And by the way, they weren't wrong around this time, right? From 2009 to 2011. The problem was not the message. The problem was the profits, right? Like every person that was trying to pitch me social media services and video services was a failed loan officer or a failed realtor, right?
Yeah, they just jumped over on the bandwagon.
Yeah, like, okay, so you couldn't sell houses and now you're going to try to sell me social media, right? So like, it was very, very aggravating. And then about 3 months ago, maybe, when did ChatGPT come like really hot?
January.
January.
Was
So it was
massive, yeah.
this year. Okay.
Yeah.
And then 4.0 really pushed it to the next level. But yeah.
So in January, everyone became an AI expert overnight, right?
That's true.
So I really was looking forward to this conversation because obviously you guys have been geeking out on this for some time now. So yeah, so when Danny says this conversation is fire, absolutely, I've been looking forward to this conversation. And, you know, we've had some conversations prior to this. A question from Danny is, do you track burglaries? That's an interesting question.
So we do. I'm trying to like think of the right way to frame this. So criminal records specifically, and that's subsected out by misdemeanors and criminal felonies. So those are very different things. For those who don't know, misdemeanor would be like a traffic ticket at the lowest level. And then a criminal conviction can be very, very serious things like arson, murder, things like that.
Burglary.
Yes. So yes, we do track that, and it's built into our models as well.
But you're tracking on the person side.
Yes.
I think his interests, because he's talking about, you know, was that a data
if a
point
house
for
was
selling?
broken into.
Yeah.
So those are built into our models. One of the things that we're doing pretty soon actually is actually segmenting every single list in our data points. And then like, obviously it's applied in our models, but it's going to be like, hey, here's the score. And then here are the top 20 distress factors for every single list. And criminal convictions is one as well.
Yeah.
And it's a very like effective list, I would say. Like it's very niche, but if someone has a criminal felony and they have a house, like they're going to jail. So like they got to probably sell, right?
Well, that's like we have the criminal list. So we have that in here. Like, so I started a nonprofit organization only to pull data from Maricopa County. So I'm able to pull all the criminal convictions in Maricopa County.
Interesting.
Right. I'm sorry, not convictions, trials. I can pull everyone that's going to trial
Oh.
for,
That's it's even better. They're
right?
not convicted yet, but
yeah, they're not convicted,
they might be thinking, I need
but
some
they're
money.
going to trial.
Yeah.
So I have access to this data, right? And so, you know, this is, you're having it like after, right? Like after they,
Yeah, they've been
Yes.
convicted on
Yeah.
both of these, and that's for each of them respectively.
So that's just, you know, fun fact for the day. Danny Fee also has a follow-up question is, do you have any features that score the likelihood of an owner being open to creative financing from exiting?
So we don't have a model for it, but we have a filtering system for it. So like interest rates is obviously a big thing, and so is equity. So a lot of people are going towards like a free and clear or high equity to overlay into their stacked list, which is great. I would say free and clear has the most volume of investor transactions, but you have to sort through a lot of hot garbage to get there.
Yeah.
That's just how it is.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, so we are tracking that based on like equity and based on like an interest rate if we've got it. Because if they have like less than 10% equity, but they do want to sell, they're going to be a lot more open to that because they have a great rate and they have not enough equity to sell completely to an investor.
Right.
And I think we've had some inquiries on this. You
Yes.
probably know more, but that's
No, that's the best way to say it. We don't really have a model built out for it, but we have certain indicators I think we can look towards to really capitalize off that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so what you guys need, and I don't know how you guys do this with the data, but to feed your machine learning, is here are all the homeowners that sold their house, creative financing, and then you guys can filter that out.
So we have done some digging into that. It's so
Well,
that's
because
a-
it's hidden intentionally.
yeah, it's
Right?
it's a whole other
It's a
rabbit
very hard
hole of-
subset to find.
Yeah. Like, and so you guys are gonna have to talk to Pace. And it's like, hey, if you guys can submit to me
Yeah,
all the sub 2 deals,
all that training data, like bring it to us.
right? Then after you have the
Yes.
training data, then you could potentially
100%.
figure that out.
And
Because that's all you're missing is the feeder data that says
These
here are all
people
the
did do
people
this.
sold sub 2 or creative.
and realistically, having that training data is very important, but having that constant line to continue the training data so it
Yeah.
can get better and better over time.
Absolutely. You guys are gonna definitely have to talk to him. And then I completely failed to mention this earlier before we went to the break. So you guys had some questions here about how accurate is the data. So you guys are doing something I think is kind of obscene, right? In that you guys are giving away your data, your skip tracing, or 5,000 records
Yes,
Right.
for the show.
for the show.
Yes.
So for anyone that's watching the show right now, if you guys were to go to the dataflik.com,
Yep.
and you guys do disrupt 5,000, all caps, Rami was very clear.
Please.
All caps, disrupt, DISRUPT 5,000, you guys can get 5,000 free skip trace records.
Correct.
Now, it's a coupon, it's a one-time use.
Yes.
So if you submit a record list of 300, that's all you get.
Yeah. So
So
if you're gonna do it, I would highly advise double checking that it's at least 5,000 because
Yeah.
you're gonna be leaving money on the table if you don't.
A
do it that
very
way.
important thing to also add is these are 5,000 hits,
Mhm.
not 5,000 records, right?
yeah,
That hit rate on our data is at least generally about 92%, but
Mhm.
with formatting, things like that, it may be worth it to put in like 7,000, 8,000 to make sure you get the full value.
oh, that makes sense.
Yes.
There you go. Right. Which again, I think it's kind of obscene that you guys are giving away 5,000 records, but you guys want that, disrupt 5,000 to get 5,000 free records. Question from Omar. So just again, to answer his question, how accurate is skip tracing data?
Get that question a lot. So the best way, well, you get this question probably a little bit more than I do.
So accuracy is pretty hard to find, right? Hit rates, pretty easy, right? You gave us this many, on average, 92%, depending on formatting, may go down to 80, whatever. In terms of accuracy, that is super hard to track simply because you're relying so much on the person using the list, the call system, all of that. And it's almost an impossibility unless we're having some API feed all that data back into our system constantly.
And we started to implement like that kind of governance piece that we talked about earlier, where it's like, hey, here's a list of all the verified sellers from our users. And these are people who they found through call and text. And obviously they use our skip tracing. So we can go back and trace like, hey, here's this number. Let's tag it as accurate. And we're trying to build those systems of metrics to measure performance, but it's a very long tail play.
And
How can you?
so there's some illegal ways we could do it, but we're not trying to be illegal, right? Essentially with skip tracing, there's certain tiers to it. And the marketing tier, which everyone generally uses, you're only allowed to pull from certain databases. Then there's what's called restricted databases, which generally goes up in profile, like debt collection, police officers, law enforcement, etc.
Government usage is probably the best way to put
I
it.
started a debt collection company as well. So anyway,
Well, debt collectors being part of that, you have access to a more restricted data set that we're not allowed to use for marketing purposes. However, and this, once again, pretty borderline illegal, but if you ran just a sample of our list through that center to be able to see how many of these numbers actually do overlap, you'd be able to get pretty good accuracy rating.
yeah.
So, long answer. We can't give you an exact accuracy, but no one really can. So, if they tell you that, they're probably doing some stuff they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, or they've done just hundreds and hundreds of thousands of cold calls themselves and have tracked all that to have a base level.
Yeah. So the best thing to do is maybe take an existing data set, give Trace the 5,000 for free with you guys, and they just compare.
And then give it a run.
Yeah. And you talking about illegal, right? Like I asked you guys some questions earlier. You guys like, we can't do that.
Like we could, but we can't.
Right. We very much.
And I was asking you, specifically, like, could you? It would be helpful for me if you can give me a list of every homeowner whose credit score went from 720 to 650 in a week. Because if their credit score went from 720 to 650, it's only a matter of time. Either they stop paying the mortgage, or it's a matter of time until their mortgage becomes a problem.
Correct.
Yes.
Most of the time. Yeah.
Right? It turns out it's illegal to pull that data.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
Once again, there's certain ways to model it and have indicators towards it, but to target that specifically
Yeah.
is not the most legal activity.
Not the most legal, but man, I'd really love to have that data. So let's see, follow-up question or a different question from Marcio on YouTube. What type of motivated seller leads can Dataflick system detect? So do you guys track bankruptcies, auctions, high equities, liens, etc.?
All of those that you just said, yes.
So there's like 19 to 20 core ones. The only two that we don't do are probate and divorce. However, we do pre-probate. If you don't know what that is, basically like it's the period before we enter probate court, essentially. You never know.
It's a question that comes up, right? What's the difference between pre-probate and probate?
Fair.
Yeah.
And the reason we don't do that is because in some states, it's very, very, very difficult to get. Like an example would be New York. If you wanted a probate or divorce list, from that actual, like to get that, you have to be a probate attorney or a divorce attorney. So like getting it is very, very difficult to do.
Yeah.
And then as far as the other lists, every list that you can imagine, we are tracking it. And that's from like some of our more like unique stuff, like criminal felonies.
Short-term loan inquiries.
Yes. So short-term loan is one of my favorites. It's basically like if someone's trying to get a payday loan, we see those inquiries. And if they're trying to get cash fast, most of the time they would be open to an offer.
So you guys have access to that data point, those data points?
Yes, it's built into our models.
Yeah. I mean, that seems like a really strong data point.
I think it's
Yes.
fire. It's my favorite
We
one.
like that. Zombie properties is also one that I very much like. It's essentially if it's vacant and about to go into foreclosure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe something we could talk about is an idea I've had, but I've never gone and executed, was just advertising at all the payday loan places, right?
Yeah, I love that idea. And like sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, with geofencing,
I was about to say, yep.
we could just geofence all the payday loan places.
We could do that.
And then start doing targeted ads to that, followed by a mailer or a call or a text to push them in that direction after a 2-week period. Yeah.
Right. I mean,
100%.
we're going to talk about like, geofencing. They went to a payday loan place. We got geofencing. We can retarget them. And then once they show up on the website, if they click on the ad, now we can retarget them forever on Facebook and everything else.
100%. And we can even tie that payday back to our system to see this user, their mailing address, are they on our list for a high likelihood to sell or not? So it's even an extra layer of governance to save on marketing.
Yeah. I mean, we can geek out on this stuff all day.
How much time we got?
All right. So Russian Nico on IG. So DM geofencing pricing, even though relatively affordable, seems like a barrier to entry for most. However, the question is, what does a good Hulu ad look like? Okay, so if you were to create an ad on Hulu, what would it look like?
Obviously I can't just show you right off the bat, but for those who are listening, just type in, I would start with Open Door and OfferPad. Those are going to be top tier, like highest level, those people, because I think they actually have their commercials on their YouTube. Just because they're running paid ads to the actual YouTube channel. So most of the time what people do is they'll like post the video on YouTube and then drive traffic towards it. So those will be two incredible examples. The other thing, I've seen a few ads on like WeBuyHouses.com. So maybe look up their YouTube channel. They'll have some. And I think
Those are some
that
good
should be a good
examples.
start.
Yeah.
And like these commercials, at least with the initial testing, don't have to be the best commercials in the world by any means, right?
Think of them as like virtual bandit signs. Like, don't overthink it.
Yeah.
And like I've seen about $1,000 to $1,500 for like a decent commercial. If you're trying to get crazy, like 3,000 to 4,000. But like with our geofencing stuff, as far as like the pricing goes to do that, our users are going to have access to that for free. And then we're probably going to make it a paid like standalone service as well for people who aren't current users.
How long until that's rolled out?
That's the question. We're trying to figure out the right amount of testing before deploying it. And I think we're going to gradually like break it out to like more and more users every month. But I would say like 30 to 60 days.
Yeah. So the biggest thing that we kind of talked about with this is it's a stacking effect, right? So month after month, you should expect more traction as your brand name builds, all of that. So we want to give it adequate time to truly ramp up as much as it can so we can see those results.
At least where it's like, here's what month 1 looked like, month 2 looked like, just to have a baseline.
Okay. I was going to say, because we're ready to test.
Yeah, of course.
Once again, we'll talk after the show.
I guess a follow-up question, right? Because, Omar's question about how accurate is the record. You guys appear to be underpricing the market at 8 cents, right? How are you guys able to do it? Because like I typically see 14 cents, and if you spend like a large amount, it gets down to 10 cents.
I mean, like, I feel like our whole thing is we saw, I don't want to say price gouging is the right word, but for us, like, we feel like we can produce a good product for 8 cents that we're also happy with and we know people will get success with. And we're kind of taking the mindset of like, we want people to crush. So they obviously stay with us and get more data and things like that.
Right.
And I think when people are charging like 15 cents, 20 cents a hit, like some people do, like, I don't know how you can be profitable, to be honest.
Yeah.
Unless it's like detective level research, like one-off pools.
Yeah. There's definitely a place for like that crazy
On
high
like a list of
caliber
100.
skip tracing, right? Like if you're trying to door knock these people and you got like a list of 100 people, maybe do like the 20-cent hits that are like private investigation level.
Right.
But we're just trying to be like an affordable option for people.
Gotcha. I was going to have another question after that. Dang it. So Ryle says he loves all this information. KMAGE on YouTube. What is the difference between Dataflick and Authentic?
Yes.
You get that objection.
I do get this question a lot. Obviously, I've never looked at Authentic's like data to the degree of like knowing what their models are, knowing their raw data sources, because I just don't think they'd give it to me if I asked, you know? But so getting past the model part, which there's decent overlap with our model. In fact, I know some users who are using both us and Authentic. And one thing they love to do is stack us together in mail, right? Because if it's on two completely independent ML AI models, it's most likely the right one to hit.
Pretty strong list.
Yes. But then it gets into the structure, right? So for us right now, we're a 6-month agreement paid monthly. And we include skip tracing into our list as well, because we want to, once again, really encourage that multi-level marketing. Now, if you have any external lists, let's say you pull a prop stream or a batch list and you want to skip, if you're a user, we'll skip those at 6 cents a record.
So even cheaper.
I will say, to build off of that, there's some people always ask us like, hey, do we need to pull like other data points like with your data? Mostly no, but you can get some really good lists from the county that like you physically cannot get anywhere else. So an example would be like environmental liens or like
Water shutoffs.
Water shutoff is a great list. So like,
It's actually the reason why I started that nonprofit to begin with. But that
what
went
was
nowhere.
the
So
water
we need to
shutoff?
talk more about this nonprofit after the show as well.
But like overlaying those lists in and skip tracing them, that's something what we also do.
Yeah.
And like there are people who I would say do that pretty regularly.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So one question I've had in the past, right? Because I wonder, you're charging, in your instance, 8 cents a record, other instances, 15 cents a record, whatever. Is it a situation where you're pulling at once and then you're charging multiple times, right? Because like, let's just say Maricopa County, where you said is the third largest county in the country. And every wholesaler seems to be here, it feels like, right? Like, because this is the guru capital of the world. And then on top of that, we have a bunch of people starting here. So if we were to skip trace a house up the street, 123 Main Street, right, the most popular address in the world. If I was to skip trace it, right, could you not house that record and then not have to pay for it again? I don't know, for a week or a month, whatever.
Yeah, so there's definitely time limits on it, right? You don't want the number to get old and stale. You want to refresh that as often as you can.
Yeah.
But no, if two people back to back skip the same record,
Right.
yeah, it's already housed in our system for
So
sure.
it's already housed in your system. So when someone's charging 15 cents a record and their cost is, I don't know, 3 cents.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
it depends on if they're white labeling it or if they're pulling it themselves.
Yeah. So if they're pulling it themselves, they might have paid 3 cents for that record and they're selling it 5 times for 15 cents each.
multiple people.
Multiple people.
Yeah.
Is that accurate hypothesis?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's interesting too. Like I have no idea how other people do it. But like most of the industry is repurposing the same databases, and
Well, what I hear all the time is like everyone's just reselling IDI. But anyway, continue.
okay, yeah, I didn't want to say that. That's what most people do. So for us, we don't work with them at all. They're not one of our sources, but we take those 6,000 sources and we update that last reported date every month on all of our users' skip tracing data. So that's like, I guess, the big difference, because like the numbers may be the same, but that last reported date could change a lot. So like, say for example, I've looked up, family members, people we know, and like, depending on like our source databases, someone may have an active phone number like 2 years ago, but that's still their number. Like it just could be how it falls. But I've also seen examples where, say we've had a list that we skipped, a record, and then a new source comes up, or they change a source that they are actively using, and now all of a sudden they go from a last reported date from 2020 to this month. So that completely changes the order of the skip tracing that we're providing people. And that's something I really haven't seen people do.
And on top of that, using it almost as a filtration system as well. So what we found, and this was through initial testing, right? So every county, different. Don't shoot me if this isn't your calculation. But once we started almost having caps on that last reported date, using it as an extra governance, extra filtration, we saw it remove about 50% of wrong numbers while still kind of preserving the accuracy of the list, which is pretty massive in terms of, once again, the efficiency piece with cold calling.
Right.
I mean, back in the day, we were giving out like 10 numbers per record, which looking back is a nightmare.
Yeah.
And that's like pretty common practice for most like other skip tracing.
So you're saying
platforms.
of the 4 numbers we get, up to the 4 numbers we get, all 4 of them were accurately reported at one point.
In the last 2 years, they were reported.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a huge part that I actually left out.
Yeah. So, because I know we talk about, like at least one of them was, but you're saying all 4 at one point or another were reported.
Yes.
In the last 2 years. So a great example, I've looked at my parents' address many times as test sequences. So we used to have a home phone. That last reported date on there was the same year we cut the line off, which was like back in 2012.
Right. It's almost like a credit report.
Exactly. It's refreshed every
Last
month.
reported date.
And we run monthly updates on all source databases, which obviously changes the skip tracing a lot.
Right. So guys, please fire away with your questions. I mean, I see a bunch of eyeballs in here, and I think that to get access to this wealth of information is very, very uncommon. So please ask more questions here, and we can geek out all day, but I want to make sure you guys get your questions answered. So Ernesto on YouTube, the phone numbers provided, are they scrubbed to see if the phone number is disconnected or connected?
Yes. So we run through 2 other governance databases. So one of them is we remove business lines and like VoIPs, if you're familiar with those. And so like we actually run those run those records through like Google as an example. And we have a system to detect if it's associated with a business line. And obviously that's not good, so we remove them. The other aspect is we do remove the TCPA litigation risk records. So it's like people who have filed lawsuits or could be seen as high risk to doing direct outreach to them. So we remove those, no questions asked. And then we also overlay an element of if you want DNC removed, you can choose to do that, but it's an option because I know some people are fearless out here.
I mean, if you're going to not call the DNC, I don't know how many deals you can do.
I agree. I've seen some insane stats on this where
I
it's
was about
like
to say.
50 to 60% of all skip trace numbers are on the DNC.
Well, on top of that, unnamed user A, we will say, does indeed reach out to the DNC, and 60% of their deals come from cold calling and texting the DNC.
Yeah, I don't
But-
know how you could run a profitable business
Yeah.
opting out of a.
But massive disclaimer, we do not condone doing that.
Yes, 100%. We have
Yeah.
the system there so you can check the button and not have to worry about it.
Or not check the button.
I was
Completely up to you,
I
but
was
once again.
as a business owner, you got to make a business decision, and my implication on which business decision you should make it's pretty strong. What's the approximate cost in geo-targeting a payday loan type of insurance, and does VPN factor in IP targeting? So if someone, we just had this idea, right? We're going to geofence payday loan companies, right?
Yes.
What's it going to cost to just geofence those?
It heavily depends on the traffic to the payday places. So that's the very interesting part to this.
A good metric. So about 10,000 records cost about 3,500 to, absolutely blanket these people. Like they will see
constantly.
you everywhere. And that's like also been tested of like you need that 35 cents per month hit is per like record that you're reaching out to is a good rule of thumb based on our metrics of testing thus far.
Yeah.
And I want to say that you can actually tailor the campaign, like whatever the campaign is. So say we're going to payday loan example. So that should still be 35 cents a hit. It doesn't really matter the targeting.
Yeah. This is completely different than what we talked about so far, but is there a way for us to skip trace someone that shows up on our website? Because I know that was a service that was provided before by someone else, but they never rolled it out, I think, for legal reasons. So I show up on dataflik.com. Could you skip trace me based off your IP address? And that's the reason why I did the whole IP address geofencing thing before.
Interesting.
Got you.
So I don't know that question. I could give you a good shot at it, but I just don't know 100% for certain because the IP address stuff is technically like a privacy, falls under the Privacy Act stuff. I think you can't do that. I think we can do that, but we can't do that.
Yes. That's
And I think
exactly
that's exactly what it was. I think because he was going to roll it out, and then it never rolled out.
I know, like, if you're trying to do this at like the very granularly, you could actually probably export those IP addresses and have a VA take them. And then there are so many providers of IP address reverse lookup, same technology as reverse skip tracing lookup, but you just type in the IP address, it'll spit out a person, take person, skip trace manually. Probably the best bet for that.
Yeah, and that's where I was going, like within 5 miles. Like this is
Yeah, no,
that's not helpful
that's
at all.
not good.
Yes.
Yeah. So guys, keep firing away on your questions. I'm going to ask some more questions over here. So, you guys obviously when you started this, it sounded like you were landscaping, kind of like a little bit lost. You were doing marketing, but still kind of young and kind of figuring this out. Have you guys figured out your purpose, your why? Why are you doing what you're doing?
You want to start?
Sure. So, once again, for me, friends and family is massive, right? I have a massive family, and friends are like everything. They help me through the hard times when I was going through a lot, when just everything, right? So, yes, taking care of them is massive, massive, massive on my list. But even more than that is I love when my friends succeed. So, for example, I have a cousin, Logan. Hey, Logan. He's a chef, and he's a sous chef right now, working his way to be head chef, doing phenomenal. If I could help him open a restaurant one day, like that is what keeps me going, 180%. Or like my brother's always talked about, he's a mechanical engineer. I know you have the engineering background too. So he always just loves tinkering with things. If I could help fund an invention of his one day, something like that, that's definitely my why.
That's awesome. How about you?
I think the whole like entrepreneurial like journey kind of started with freedom because I was like, I was actually started in mortgage and was fired from a mortgage job. And I was like, I don't want to rely on other people ever again. So that's like what started that journey. And it started with freedom, but now I think like as I've gotten like older, like more mature, it's turned into very similar to like him, like you know, supporting and like giving that level of freedom to like my future family is massive. Because like I don't want, you know, them to feel like that they have to do something. I would much rather them do something that they like enjoy and want to do. And like I think there's a lot of ways that our like understanding and knowledge through tech could like make a pretty big impact like in other ways, like just around the world. So like, you know, we have friends who are working on tech projects on the machine learning space that are tailored to strictly like, you know, detecting cancer as an example. So like my mom's a radiation therapist. So she, you know, it deals a lot with that kind of stuff. And like, just there are so many use cases where machine learning can be used and like AI in general to like better the world. And even like through like green technology and stuff like that. And like that stuff's like super important to us.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of more, and it's very dynamic. Like it changes a lot, but
One thing we didn't talk about, you were in mortgages. Like, what were you doing in mortgages?
yeah. So the origin story kind of goes where I dropped out of college and then I went from that into, so my parents' neighbor, he was an executive at a mortgage company in Tennessee, pretty large, not like, you know, institutional level, but they probably have about like 90 branches in Tennessee. So decent size. And so I asked him like, hey, can I have a job? I want to learn real estate, but I don't want to go to school for it. And so he was like, we actually have an appraisal, like risk management job that's opening up, but you're going to have to like get an appraiser license. And I was like, all right, well, I just dropped out, nothing else to do. So I just went and through that whole process, which is pretty like in depth. I don't know how much you or the viewers know, but like you basically have to do about 8 weeks of like actual education and like take an exam and then hang your license under someone who's already an appraiser and things like that. So I essentially did that, joined a mortgage company to like lead risk management for like the loans that we were actually like approving or not approving based on the appraisal. And from there, like I learned a lot about underwriting real estate, which was great for like flips and stuff.
Great experience.
Then from there, I was like, need some sales experience. So in the same company, I got my mortgage license to be a loan originator and did that for like 6 months, hated it. And I was underneath someone. So I was technically an assistant because it's the same kind of like, like trajectory. And like, we were pretty slow. So like I was fired from that job and then offered the appraisal risk job. And I was like back and I was like, don't want to do that at all.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what started the like the whole like I want to do real estate thing. And that was when I was I just like house hacked as well and like had roommates. So I was living for free and just putting all the money I was making back in education. And from there, that was when I got into fortune builders, which I don't even think that they're, you know, an entity anymore as
Yeah, I
far
heard
as
they just closed or something.
yeah. So that's where I started. It's crazy expensive, massive risk, and learned a lot really fast. And that was like the big community that I got connected with through Tiff and Josh. And then 3 months later, I was like, Rami, got to do this real estate
And
thing.
how did you guys get connected?
We have known each other since 6th grade.
Yeah.
Yeah. Went to school in Alcoa, Tennessee. I got him to play soccer in 8th grade. That was the start.
Yeah, super humble beginnings. Like, I mean, through that like whole time of like learning, like we were doing Instacart, DoorDash at night, like, you know, saving all of our money, living off of virtually nothing because I had house hacks, so we were just doing that. And then going to Columbus was like the first job I had since like I'd been in the mortgage space, and it was obviously just to like learn as much as I could. And even then, like, I mean, you lived on the floor.
Oh yeah, I had no money.
We had like 650
If
square
Tiff
foot
didn't
studio.
loan me a mattress, I would have slept on his couch for 3 months, hands down. Like,
And yeah, we were just super hungry. And like, I think like a big thing for us is like, we were so dedicated and focused on making this work that we were willing to do anything.
Yeah. What's your guys' big struggle right now?
right now,
I would say like, we're just trying to get to the point of like having a nice foundation of scaling. So like Dataflik itself, like we haven't spent anything on marketing and we've grown completely organically to this point. So like we're almost laying the foundation of like, products that we think will really move the needle, and making sure that we have a nice foundation to like make really good hires and to expand more than we already have. And just making sure that that's done right is very complex.
Like a very common thing you hear is don't work in your business, work on your business, right? And I think right now we are definitely working on the business. Our whole goal is to keep this growing as much as we can, but there's still things that we're definitely in the business at the moment as well.
Yeah. And what are you guys' superpower?
You wanna go first?
Is this like me about mine or me about his?
It'd be easier if you guys talking about each other's.
All right. Oh gosh, that's a hard question. So for Rami, I think we talked a lot about empathy here. So like Rami's ability to work with other people, whether it be like another like employee or like me or just like our clients or users or whomever, his just conviction to make sure that they do well and like the level of care that he has is incredible. And his ability to like just care for people and like be a really good friend or like a really good business partner or a great like software to a user, I think is like why we're here. Like we've made it this far because of that level of conviction that he's had through this whole process, I think.
Yeah. Well, what is Ty's superpower?
I would say Ty's is honestly the ability to keep pushing us forward. Like I know I definitely have those moments where I'm like, oh, we should do this, but I always have that voice in the back of my brain like, oh, but look at the bank account. Oh, look at this, look at that. Ty is just phenomenal at painting the picture of what's to come with the company. Like, hey, what if we tied this in? What if we add this integration here? And like, there's a lot of big things that we didn't talk about on this show because we're just not there yet that I know will be included in the future because he's constantly pushing us. Yeah. So I would say constantly looking out for the future and guiding us on that path. Yeah, it's probably his superpower.
Seeing what's possible.
100%.
Gotcha.
Thanks,
man. Which failure did you guys learn the most from?
So many.
Man, it's got to be hiring. So like for us, we have gone through, hired and fired. I don't want to say like dozens, but probably like 15 like different people at least in the last like 3 years that I was so sure were great, and they just weren't. So like really honing in on like what we needed, and a lot of that like failure I think is like on me for not really building the systems right. And like when I've looked back on it in the past, like these people were almost set up for failure. So I think like focusing on hiring in general and like learning some really hard lessons on that front was.
So I'd say it's a mix though, right? Because we were also, once again, pretty bootstrapped back then. Like we're at a point where we were trying to make this amazing system happen with not a lot of like amazing resources to create. So I think a lot of that comes down to, sure, we definitely learned a ton. We weren't nearly as educated as we should have been on that hiring process or what the results should look like as much, but a big part was the pressure of where we were. Yeah. And I think that got to us. I don't want to say got to us, but made us make some poor decisions on that front.
Things were probably more rushed than they needed to be, I think.
Yeah.
And like just slowing down, having that consistency.
Like if we had the dev team we had now and just decided to build that out at the very beginning, it'd be a very different ballgame now, right?
But, you go back to hiring, Ren is someone that, obviously we all know pretty well. He actually has like, part of our sales leadership training is like how to effectively identify and keep the best people. Cause that's one of the hardest things, right? Is like, how do we truly figure out this guy is good or not? Cause I'm like you, everyone I've hired, I thought was going to be amazing.
You're like banger. I know they'll be awesome.
This is, I hit another grand slam.
Yeah, that's exactly how I am.
And then it turns out they're not all grand slams.
No.
Yeah, some of them are strikeouts. So a question here from Paul. How can I subscribe or check us out? Again, go to dataflik.com, disrupt 5000, all caps, and you can demo all this. Oh, he said he just ran it. Yeah, Dataflik is doing better. Oh, cool. So he already We already did it. That's pretty quick. Awesome.
Nice. Did he do all 5,000 hits?
I don't know, but that was pretty quick in a matter of minutes. Perfect. So I want you guys to think about some last thoughts you guys want to leave the listeners with. I'm going to make a couple of quick announcements, and then we'll go with that. So, guys, I personally see an opportunity in this market. I'm excited to seize the moment. Actually had some pretty exciting conversation I was sharing with you earlier about some opportunities and how we might be able to capitalize on it. Mm-hmm. So if you guys have capital and you don't know where to get started, you can invest with us. Or if you have killer deals that you need help to close on, you can partner with us. Go to teamwithsteve.com and maybe we can do business together. And if you guys got value today, I hope you guys did, because I got a ton of value today. Like, subscribe, share, and comments. And then tune in next week. We got Jack Bosch. He is the land guy of all the people. I think he's the one that has been doing it the longest and knows the most. So what are some last thoughts you want to leave the listeners with? I'll start with you, Rami.
The biggest thing is let the data tell the story, I guess. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like too many people go off of, I heard Leans was really good today, or I heard this or that. Even right now, we're building out what we're calling kind of a market map, where even if you're not using our data, we can look in your county and say, yeah, in your county, there were 7,500 liens, and from those 7,500, 500 of them sold to an investor in the past 3 months, or just an example, right? Yeah. But let the data do the talking is the main thing. Follow your KPIs, actually track everything, just trust the data.
Yeah, trust the data. And that's the hard part.
That really is.
Because we want to go against that. We want to go with our gut, but the data is screaming at you.
100%.
Go with the data.
So we talked a lot about this before the show and everything, but I think like the biggest testament to like what led to our success was just being really consistent and focused. Mm-hmm. And I really believe that if you are like, I want to do this business, even if it's not real estate, whatever it is, if you are completely dedicated and like consistent and focused on that, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. And there's so many times where we almost quit. I mean, we're like that close. And I'm obviously very thankful we didn't, but I think it's just like enlightening people that that's pretty normal. Mm-hmm. And you have to remember to just be consistent and focused on one thing. Because obviously my brain never stops. I'm always calling him like, hey, what can we do this? Probably shouldn't do it, but I'm the most guilty of that. But I think that's something that we've learned over the years is insanely important. And I wish I had had more focus earlier in my life, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think that's guilty. A lot of us are guilty of it, especially, if you're an entrepreneur, right? So, we talk about the importance of focus and how easy it is to get distracted. The other thing too, you talk about consistent, and that's the one thing I put in my message, right? If you'll take consistent action.
Love
and I did a presentation a few weeks ago, and I shared the asterisk, right? We all talk about, I'll do whatever it takes. Like, how many of us say, I'll do whatever it takes? But there's an asterisk there, because I'll do whatever it takes, and the asterisk underneath that is except for being consistent. Like, that's the one thing.
Right.
I'll do whatever it takes to be successful, except for being consistent. Because I think a lot of us kind of let ourselves off the hook with the consistency component.
100%, man.
Yeah.
If someone wants to get a hold of you guys, how should they do that?
I believe that there are some links in the show notes. Mm-hmm. One is for an investor demo, if that interests you, and obviously the skip tracing coupon, make sure to use that. But I think if you just follow the links that should be in the show notes, that is probably the best way.
Schedule a call with me. Love to talk to you.
I see it right here.
info@Dataflick is also the generic email that people just send when they have inquiries or questions and things like that. But yeah. So.
All right. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next week.
Shout out to Steve Train. Jump on the Steve Train. We real estate disruptors.